The Audemars Piguet Royal Oak was always my favorite among all the high-end sports watches. Too bad this catalog doesn't have any of them. Audemars Piguet, what have you done? This is not a catalog. It's not. It's a promotional book for the Code 1159. Yes, it has the entire 1159 collection when what they released in that first initial release in it in a sort of catalog format, but really it's a showcase of the Code 1159 and of some of Audemars Piguet's history in the form of photos of watches, not really blocks of needlessly fluffy text. This was one of the first catalogs I really got. Yeah, it's one of the first catalogs I got. And it's quite special. It was handed to me in an Audemars Piguet boutique in New York City. I hope they're still alive. And the design is just breathtaking. It's black, gold, and pink. Has these pink glossy things on the sides of the catalog, and I'm not sure they're, well, throughout they have this kind of transition to the pink on some of the pages. You have a very thick hardcover. I mean, this is a very thick hardcover, and it's quite a unique hardcover. It's not like any other hardcover I've seen. The end of the cover is just completely flat. It's just like a flat, thick sheet of cardboard. Well, not cardboard being with those holes inside, but, well, you know what I mean. Code 1159, nice title, Audemars Piguet in gold with round and then an octagon. And I think that is really a key aspect of what is the 1159. Many people have criticized the 1159 for several reasons, mainly because it was lauded as being one of the greatest new leaps of Audemars Piguet, but ended up sort of down, not downgraded from the Royal Oak and the Offshore and all those newer, crazier, uglier watches, but sort of less than them in their craziness. They're less crazy. And there's a reason for that, and I'll get to it as we explore through here. We have another circle. We have this translucent page that switches to transparent. I guess you could say transparent the whole thing, but I don't know. Title, and we start. Stands for its genetic code, Code 1159. I mean, that title would suggest something really special. Really? Yeah, you have some different quotes, some things about how the dial is complicated, and the complications of making a dial like that, it really showed me how interesting dials can be with the gold lettering and all that stuff. It's really quite interesting. Got some photo. Even this, they made it pink. Interesting. Dare to follow convictions. Evolve. We start with a nice little crazy watch. This watch spilling over itself. Another transparent page. And then the details. Precision is in the details. Uniquely recognizable. And here we see why you have a circle with the octagon. The case is both an octagon and a circle. And I think the case is absolutely spectacular. It just is. The details, the thought of going into it, it doesn't seem to be able to work all the elements together, but it does. It really, really does. It's quite nice. The dial, they say they worked hard on it to make it this crazy curved sapphire thing. I'm not too convinced about the dial. I mean, the dial, the crystal. I mean, of course. Refinement, depth, all these things. Movement variety. They did release quite a few new movements with this new release. This is a new release from last year or 2 years ago now. I think it's last year, but I don't know. Code 1159. Yeah, blue lacquered dial. The signature thing. These dials. Let's find a nice thing. We start with a self-winding thing. Self-winding. Chronograph. Well, let's go back. I missed something. The dial has a few unique features. The font. The 12369 only with the batons. The minute numbers. The completely sticky hands. The second hand having that circular counterbalance. And it's an interesting dial. You know, I'm not sure about it. Completely sure. I do think that it can grow on me and on everyone who is remotely interested in this, that it will grow on us. But I'm perplexed less about this release and more about just the choice of the dial. It's a bit out there. One of the things, I don't know. I really just don't know. The chronograph is a little more cluttered. That kind of makes it more approachable in a way. It is quite a weird dial, all of these dials. Chronograph, it's a new movement and it's quite nice. Let's see if of course they don't show a big movement photo. Here you have a perpetual calendar, but with the chronograph, the movement, what's interesting is when you press the buttons, how it all moves. The column wheel is quite an interesting shape. You've got to see it in person. When you press the button, really you can see everything moving in this hypnotic way. It's quite nice. Perpetual calendar I don't really like. The dial. I mean, when I say these dials are weird, I think they're weird. See, Royal Oak dial has a familiarity with it. I don't know if that comes from time of knowing the Royal Oak or just the design. And that's the question I'm going to ask this watch. Will this become like the Royal Oak dial, or will it always be cool? Not cold, but cool. That's the word. Perpetual calendar, not a huge fan of that. Self-winding flying tourbillon, that's interesting again. And weirdy dial. An interesting ring around the tourbillon opening. We continue through here. An open work tourbillon. I don't believe this is a new movement. I believe they had that. But I could be wrong. Unique hand-wound tourbillon movement. Oh, maybe it's the regular tourbillon watch that is an existing movement, and this is a new movement. I don't know. I don't really care too much about new movement, old movement, just that it's a nice movement. Mini repeater super sonnery. This is a really nice watch. Let me see if I can show you. See, it's not an exhibition case back. Why? Because the gongs are quite nice in that they're made louder by the fact that I believe they use the whole back of the watch as a sort of sound box or whatever you call it. They resonate with the back of the case, and I haven't had the luck to see it or hear it, but from what I understand, it's really nice. The movement, of course, looks nice, though you won't be able to see it. And that brings us to the end of this collection. That's the end of all these new releases. And you might be thinking, that's not that many watches. But remember, they released them all at the same time. Imagine if Rolex did that. What would happen? I think the world would break. What comes down was born to evolve. We see now this next quarter of the catalog is really dedicated to showing what happened and the history of unconventional design. So let's go through here and answer the question of where does the 1159 fit? First, octagon. So this is the traditional octagon. You have angular geometries and an interesting little thing there. Creative dial. Actually, I don't really like that dial too much. I like that. I like that. Contemporary design. Again, not a huge fan of that, but it's interesting. This is worse. Juxtaposed geometries. Yes. Asymmetry. That's a thing. Of course, a body of steel, which it's too expensive for the steel, but if you're paying for movement finishing and all that, that's understandable. But if you're paying for luxury, for you paid so much money for a steel thing, you can afford to buy a worthless thing for that much money. Of course, it's not worthless because it's hand finished and all that. The screws, I believe, were gold. But it's quite nice. And I do like that these screws are aligned. Yeah, Hublot, try that. This is something I don't like that much. These crazier, as they say, unapologetically, what's it called? Come on. Royal Oak concepts and all this stuff. CNC and all that stuff, yeah. We do come back to seeing the entire collection, 1159 collection. So now let me explain, because that brings us to the end of this catalog, let me explain what I think 1159 is and why I really do like it. I like the 1159 because it fulfills a role that's been needed in Audemars Piguet. Audemars Piguet has always had the really, really crazy stuff, and even the what's now considered not that crazy in the Royal Oak, and then it has had the classic side. Nothing in between. This watch can be both a classic watch, a traditional classy watch, a dress watch. This can be a dress watch, I think, but it can also be a sports watch. Royal Oak really can't be that good of a dress watch. Now, not to say that this is the best dress watch, but it's, I don't know. The Royal Oak is sport. This is business casual. I'll put it that way. Perhaps more fitting for this current generation. Whether I like that or not is another story. But I do love that case. And I think it really fulfills a good role with Audemars Piguet. They've had Royal Oak, octagonal case. They've had regular thing, round case. Why not just combine them and have something in between? And in this case, specifically the case, I think it worked. I don't like the juxtaposed geometries showed further, but this is nice. I do like that they made it so that the octagonal cues and all these design cues from traditional Audemars Piguet stuff are sort of hinted, not thrust upon the watch. It's a nice alternative for someone who thinks a Royal Oak is a bit too much but likes the history and the design. This watch really takes from the history of the Royal Oak. It doesn't add, I don't think, to the history of the Royal Oak, which is what I think people were expecting. They were expecting this 1159 to add to the Royal Oak, but I'm honestly quite glad they didn't do that. I'm really thankful that they didn't do another Royal Oak crazy, offshore, even crazier thing. I'm quite glad with this, and I think everyone should be. They took it and made it for people who like the history, but don't want... Yeah, I said that. What was I saying before I interrupted myself? Royal Oak, yeah. They didn't add to the history of the Royal Oak. They took and split it. Made a split with the Royal Oak. Well, not really split with the Royal Oak, but reinvented the Royal Oak. How about that? They reinvented what the Royal Oak could have been in the age when the Royal Oak was made. Perhaps a bit more subdued, a bit less in your face, but quite interesting, honestly. I'm not too sure about the dial, but I think it's could have been a lot worse. I do like the movements there. They're not traditional. These watches aren't traditional, but they're not modern. Yes, they are weird. I will admit that they're weird. And this review of this catalog is quite weird because I don't know how to describe these things. To me, this watch makes sense. It's weird, but it makes sense. Now the question really comes down to, would you rather have the Royal Oak or this? Now the Royal Oak is very historic, it's very iconic, it has this gargantuan presence that this watch, at least now, cannot compete with. But that brings me to the biggest difference between the Royal Oak and the Code 1159. Unlike the Royal Oak, you may actually be able to find a Code 1159. Thanks for watching the video to the end. If you liked it, please subscribe and like the video. Perhaps consider supporting me on Patreon. Any support would be greatly appreciated. I will be coming out with catalog collectors once a week for the foreseeable future. Of course, until I run out of catalogs. We'll see what happens then. See you in the next one.